Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Indie Zone. My name is Kathy. We have, over the course of the past several days, been providing you with updates and content regarding the Moscow Police Department's release of hundreds of pages of documents concerning their investigation into the tragic events of November 13th, 2022 at 1122 King Road in Moscow. One of the prior presentations dealt with an initial report that was prepared by Detective Payne describing his approximate 45-minute interview of Mr. Kohberger shortly after his arrest in Pennsylvania on December 30th, 2022. If you have not had an opportunity to review that content or the document it relates to, which is document number 135, a narrative dated January of 2023, prepared by Detective Payne, I suggest that you do because it leads directly into this presentation. There was a supplemental, a second report that Detective Payne prepared relative to his interview with Mr. Kohberger that I'd like to call your attention to. It is sequencer document number 194. This item is dated May 10th, 2023. This narrative begins by saying, on December 29th, 2022, ISP Detective Sergeant Gilbertson, Special Agent Shirley, and I arrived in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, in preparation for the service of the arrest and search warrants for Kohberger and his family's residence at, and the address is redacted, in Pennsylvania. After several coordination meetings, Detective Gilbertson, Agent Shirley, and I drove to the Pennsylvania State Police Barracks at Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, to await the arrival of Kohberger after his arrest and to interview him upon his arrival. At approximately 0200 hours on December 30th, 2022, Kohberger was brought to the Pennsylvania State Police Stroudsburg's barracks and placed in an interview room. The interview was recorded on the built-in video system at the barracks as well as on Detective Gilbertson's pocket recorder. Detective Gilbertson and I were the interviewers present. The next paragraph states, Detective Gilbertson and I began by introducing ourselves and stating which specific agencies we represented. When I stated who I was, Kohberger stated, quote, "You do look familiar," end of quote. Gilbertson read Kohberger his Miranda rights. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger about the SWAT operation at his house, to which Kohberger replied he was concerned about his parents and his dog. The next page goes into some detail, ladies and gentlemen, small talk, if it were, regarding Mr. Kohberger's attendance at Washington State University, what led him down the road of becoming a professor, and also inquiries relative to his time at DeSales University. Detective Payne writes that Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger about the job he mentioned, and Kohberger stated he was a teaching assistant. He talked about how busy he was and how the funding package that comes along with being a teaching assistant is what makes the extra work worth it. The top of page 3, Detective Payne notes that Kohberger then discussed ongoing projects with WSU PD and Pullman PD. And then later, it gets into the topic for this meeting. By way of example, Detective Gilbertson stated that that is Detective Payne and Detective Gilbertson, were there because of what happened in November just off the University of Idaho campus. And they talked a little bit more, and thereafter Mr. Kohberger sat back and said he had the utmost respect for law enforcement, but stated it was a constitutional right to speak to an attorney, and this was interpreted as Mr. Kohberger's invoking his Fifth Amendment privileges. And then after an additional inquiry, where it's stated here, Kohberger re-engaged again and asked what questions we would have for him. It was then told that he had invoked his Fifth Amendment rights and that Detective Gilbertson and Detective Payne were not going to ask any further questions. The last sentence says, "At this point, we concluded our interview with Kohberger and left the room." This is certified to, under penalty of perjury, by Corporal Payne, dated Wednesday, May 10th, 2023, and then reviewed by Sergeant Dustin Blaker on May 11th, 2023. A few points here, ladies and gentlemen. I found this point to be rather interesting the first time I read document number 135, because it's also noted there of Mr. Kohberger's informing Detective Brett Payne that, quote, "You do look familiar." And then later, in discussing his current obligations and duties at Washington State University, Kohberger stated he was a teaching assistant and discussed ongoing projects that included with two different police agencies, Washington State University Police Department and Pullman Police Department. So there's always been a thought that Mr. Kohberger may have done some work with law enforcement. It would be interesting to learn further regarding what specific contact he had, if any, with WSU, with Pullman police departments, and any other law enforcement agencies prior to the time of his arrest in Pennsylvania, which is discussed in this report. If you have any comments, any opinions, any thoughts, please leave them here. Until next time, this is Kathy. Thank you for joining us today.